you read the court's decision, the court said that the SEC's ruling in the Grayscale case was arbitrary and capricious and unlawful. Short of corruption, there's nothing worse than a court can find with regard to the behavior of an agency. And I used to head an agency, so.
Welcome to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Faryar Shirzad, who's the Chief Policy Officer at Coinbase. Faryar, it's great to have you on.
Great to be here, Tony. Thanks for having me on.
Faryar, there's lots to talk about as it relates to crypto in the United States and all the initiatives that Coinbase is doing. Before we get there, I would love to get to know you a bit better. Can you tell us about yourself, where you're from, and where'd you grow up?
Well, I'm a father of two wonderful boys, a much older boy who's 27 and a 5-year-old. So I've got a full range of a family. I live in Washington. I spent most of my life growing up here, but my father was originally an Iranian diplomat. So I grew up all around the world. We were lucky enough to be in the United States when the Iranian Revolution happened in 1979. We stayed. The U.S. took us in, and I basically lived the American dream since then. And that's why you'll find that I'm extraordinarily passionate about this country. And it was part of the reason why I got into policy, too, because I love this country. It's a privilege to be here. And it's been a mind-blowing privilege to be able to have a career in public policy, both in government and on the outside. And a lot of that is animated by growing up, going through all the political upheaval that my family went through in the Iranian Revolution, and then finding a home here in this country. So it's extraordinary. So I can tell you more about my professional life, but that's a big part of who I am, and you might find that of interest.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. And I did notice, to your point of your professional background, you worked at the White House with doing policy. Then you were also at Goldman Sachs. Yeah, tell us a bit about that. I think that's interesting because I'm always fascinated by people's resume and migrating from the traditional markets, and whether it be tech, finance, or whatever it is, and coming into crypto. So I think that'll be great.
Well, I've had a number of migrations. I was a lawyer for a number of years when I first started my career. And like a lot of young lawyers in Washington, I was trying to break into politics. And about 6-7 years after being a lawyer, I just out of luck managed to get a job as a international trade counsel on the majority staff of the Senate Finance Committee. This was in the late 90s, and it was towards the tail end of the Clinton administration, but it became one of the most active periods in trade policy in the United States. And I was involved in some historic legislation, including the legislation that ultimately brought China into the WTO. And it was an extraordinary privilege to be a part of that and to see how legislation works, the intersection between national security, economic policy, domestic politics, the mechanics of legislation. All of those things were unbelievable. And there was such a amazing job. What happened after that is that I was asked by the Bush-Cheney transition team in 2000 to come over and become one of the first staffers on the transition team that managed the handover between the Clinton administration and then the Bush administration. And so I managed one of the transition teams. I managed the transition from parts of the Commerce Department and also all of USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office. And in the course of that, after that, I became appointed. I was nominated and ultimately confirmed by the Senate as an assistant secretary running one of the bureaus at the Commerce Department. And this was an unbelievable sort of thing for a guy who actually had become a citizen not that many years before. But I say that to say that I had a transition from being a lawyer to being a trade policy person, and being lucky enough to do that at extremely high levels. And then I got got asked by the White House to come in and become a deputy national security advisor for international economics. And for people who don't know what that role is, it's a job whose job is a deputy at the National Security Council and at the Economic Council. And my job was to essentially, on behalf of the president, manage the cabinet agencies and staff the president on issues that are at the intersection of national economic policy, national security strategy, foreign policy, and domestic politics. So finance, trade. I also was the person that handled a lot of international fora, like the G8. I was the G8 Sherpa, is what they call it. So I made a transition there from being a trade guy to being a broad international economic, national security person. Then I went to Goldman Sachs after 3 years at the White House, which were unbelievable, but unbelievably grueling, as well as being an unbelievable privilege. And I became a finance guy, and I did 15 years in the pre-financial crisis period through the financial crisis. And then in the years that followed, when the entire architecture of global financial regulation was essentially redrawn, and being the guy who ran government affairs or co-headed it for a period for almost that entire time, it was professionally, it was unbelievable. It was also grueling, but it was a chance to essentially do something which hadn't been done in multiple generations, which was to help redraw the entire architecture of financial regulation. Mm. And then a couple of years ago, I got a call from a headhunter saying that Coinbase wanted to talk to me, and I didn't know that much about crypto, but I talked to Brian Armstrong, Paul Graywall, Emily Choi, and others, and I realized this was another chance to yet another professional transition from traditional finance to the cutting edge of tech and finance, but then also to help redraw the architecture of financial regulation around a brand new disruptive sector. And it's been an unbelievable privilege. Coinbase is an amazing company. The crypto community is an amazing community. And I can't tell you how lucky I feel to be a part of it.
That's awesome. You have an amazing background. I mean, certainly plethora of experience, both on the government side and obviously finance. So, I'm always curious when it clicked for everybody, when you finally understand, oh, I understand the value of Bitcoin and the blockchain and so forth. How long after maybe talking to Brian and those folks that you were like, maybe thinking about it, and it's like, I get it. I understand how this is going to change finance and how we trust each other and do commerce and so forth.
Well, if I were being totally honest, it took me a little while to fully kind of internalize it. But what I realized quickly is how passionate Brian was, how much conviction he had, but he had conviction about it in a very non-theatrical way, if that makes any sense. That's a funny way to put it.
Right.
But there was just this calm posture that he had. He saw something, and he saw it in a way that the more we talked, the more I realized it was there, even though I didn't quite see it myself. And I thought, and then I was kind of lucky, but it was hard in the process of joining Coinbase. I ended up talking to most of the board, all the management team, and a lot of other people. And I realized I was kind of being hired to be the policy guy for the entire crypto community at that time, because this was 2.5 years ago. There really wasn't much of a framework of policy, but each person I talked to was smarter and more talented than the next one, and they all saw it too. And I thought, I want to be a part of this. I'm not sure if I quite see it with the ease and calm that they see, but I could not pass up the opportunity to be a part of it. And then it kind of like dawned on me that you have this disruptive technology that solves a lot of policy issues that I thought I was so smart about, because I'm a pretty versatile policy guy. And if you ask me about like all sorts of random policy things, I can tell you a fair amount about them. But then as I understood crypto, I realized for a lot of big, pivotal, societally consequential issues, the technology is actually a path to a solution. Mm-hmm. And I don't know I can't tell you exactly when I kind of came to that revelation, but I realize now this is really, really formidable as a transformational technology, but also as a solve to a lot of complicated stressors in our society that need a resolution, and an old style resolution is not going to work. And I'm happy to dig into what I mean by that, but it took a while, I guess I would say, but not that long. But at least I knew enough to know that smart people who I learned to admire and trust saw it, and I wanted to be a part of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So on that note, I'd love to get your perspective, given your background in government as well as finance. Right now what some would call we're in the stage of then they fight you. Crypto's been around, Bitcoin's been around for over 10 years now, and it is getting adoption. We see some of the largest companies in the world are either trying to build financial products with Bitcoin and other cryptos, or adopting the tech to improve their businesses. Yet the regulators have not caught up, and yet there are those who are trying to fight it. Is this just a natural reaction to disruptive technology, as you mentioned, and it's just human psychology and behavior playing out, or is there other aspects to it that this is so disruptive, it's going to change money, it's going to change commerce, and so forth? We'd love to get your perspective on the landscape.
Yeah, I think one thing I say, which people don't immediately understand what I'm saying, is that all of us in crypto spend a lot of time complaining about regulators, but we misunderstand what a regulator is paid to do. A regulator is ultimately paid to prevent car crashes. So if they had their way, we would all drive at 2 miles per hour with helmets on and, 4-part harnesses around us. And they would be solving for what their incentive structure is, which is to prevent a bad thing from happening. It's the politicians whose job it is to have a vision. And so the only reason we can all drive now at 70 miles per hour and we don't have to wear helmets is because politicians ultimately make the call that there's a balance that needs to be found. Sure, we'd all be safer if we drove 2 miles per hour with helmets on, but as a community, as a society, as an economy, we're infinitely better off with the freedom that comes with the ability to get to rural destinations and get to, live where you need to live and get to where you need to get to in a system that allows for that. And so often I hear when people, and I have a very long list of complaints. I'm public about a lot of them about regulators do, particularly when their behavior is, arbitrary, capricious, unlawful, as has happened with a number of with one regulator in particular in recent instances. Mm-hmm. But the way I try to think of that, and the way I sort of organize what we do as a policy effort at Coinbase, is to think of our agenda in two parts. We need to make the sale to the politicians. It's their job to redefine the paradigm, to disrupt old models, to chart what the path is and what the risk balance ultimately looks like. And we need to make the case to them. And then with the regulators, if we can get the political framework right, our job it is to work with the regulators within whatever their incentive structure is to help them land where the politically approved landing zone is. And that requires explaining the technology, explaining what the risk profile is, kind of speaking their language. And I'm lucky to come from traditional finance. I'm deep into this sort of stuff. And so it's easier for me to navigate it. And I'm sorry, I'm going long here. But for example, when I first joined Coinbase, and I told Brian and Emily and Paul this, there was an active consultation at the Basel Committee on how to risk weight crypto assets on bank balance sheets. Now, when I say that, most people's eyes glaze over, but this was a fundamental determination that the global bank regulators were going to make about how to treat crypto as from a risk perspective. And this was on bank balance sheets, so this is not on a crypto entity's balance sheet.
Right.
But if we allowed that thing to land in the bad place, it was going to be a hole that was going to be very hard to dig out of. So even before I started, I actually worked with the folks that were within Coinbase for us to hire an outside consultant that ran analysis. We ultimately found that crypto assets were not particularly more volatile than mid-cap equities at the time. This would be kind of early. This would be mid-2021. And that was very powerful because we were speaking the language of regulators. We gave them risk analysis on terms they understood. We compared it to risk assets that they understood. And ultimately, it became very hard for them to hold this crazy position that they had proposed, and they had to ameliorate it. Now, they didn't get as far as we wanted to get, but it's an example of trying to find the right landing spot using the language that resonates with the decision maker you're dealing with.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And on the note of the global expansion of crypto and adoption of it, we are in a global competition, and we see, China and other countries seem to be picking up on the US lagging behind, and they're opening up financing, they're opening up regulations. The UK passed crypto regulation, the EU passed crypto regulations, and to my surprise, Hong Kong is welcoming with open arms crypto companies. Do you feel that the US is in danger here of losing market share, and losing companies and losing jobs if they don't get this right soon?
Oh, without question. And Electric Capital did analysis. They found, I think it was 2, 3 years ago, the U.S. had about 41% of open source code software developer activity occurring within the United States. Now, how you calculate that's complicated, but they used a pretty rigorous methodology, and I think it's probably a pretty good metric, at least in terms of orders of magnitude. We're now down to about 29%. We are bleeding software talent and activity outside the US. And we're bleeding it because the rest of the world has made that political decision we were kind of talking about a moment ago to embrace crypto. So 83% of the G20 is in the midst of has or is in the midst of implementing pretty thoughtful crypto regulations. So who do I mean? Japan, Korea, Australia, Singapore, the European Union, UK, Canada, Brazil, Switzerland, and so on. That is not an inconsequential issue. And so for those of us in the United States, we are quite worried. And and we frame it along the lines of what you said at the very beginning, is there a fight against crypto? I think we've won that fight. But those of us who are still in the United States working on crypto are just in a unfortunate vortex with some of the regulators who've come after crypto. And part of what we've tried to do at Coinbase, and I've tried to do with my background as a national security person with some credibility, is to tell the story that the world is adopting it. And China is actually one worth for us to talk about further, is eating our lunch on this. And I think it's a matter of time before we realize we have kind of a semiconductor moment or a 5G moment where we're going to take our natural lead, put it in a box, put a bow on it, and hand it over to other countries. And we just can't do that again.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly got it right in the .com boom with the internet, and that did wonders for our economy and great companies and big brands and things that were formed. And I'm surprised that we are dropping the ball here. And I saw someone recently shared an old article from the 90s where Bill Gates and other tech entrepreneurs were pushing back against the United States, trying to ban encryption, which would have been, one of the key pillars for the internet and doing commerce and communication. And I'm trying to remain optimistic, and I'm hoping, that they get something right. I see some bills moving through the House. I see some bills popping up in the Senate. Are you optimistic that potentially 2024 or maybe 2025, I lean more 2025 because 2024 is an election year, that we might get some comprehensive legislation and what that might look like?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question we're going to get legislation. It could be 24, 25, a little bit higher odds it would be 25, maybe 26. You don't know. I mean, I've done legislation for a lot of years. It's hard. There's lots and lots you don't control. But think about it. We have 3 bills, essentially. FIT 21, I kind of talk about as though it's 2 bills because there's a Agriculture Committee, CFTC component, and then a House Financial Services SEC component. Now, they put those together, but practically speaking, politically, it's 2 different bills. And then you've got the stablecoin bill. All 3 of those got reported out of the committees, the Ag Committee and the House Financial Services Committee, with bipartisan support. And this is with an extraordinarily ambivalent White House and a determined opposition. That's not nothing. That's actually a huge deal. And we should feel very good about that. Now, we were on track to get on the floor for a floor vote, at least on the FIT 21 bill, the CFTC SEC bill, by November. Now, the speaker thing, which, is a thing none of us can control, has obviously pushed the calendar back. But even in the midst of all of that, the politics on crypto are actually marginally by the week getting better for us. I'm saying marginally because we win some, we take 2 steps up forward, then we take a step back. But we have to have conviction. I find when people say, "Oh, this isn't the year because it's an election year. 24 is not the year and we should focus on 25," they misunderstand this is the moment in which we're getting people to sign on to crypto or not. This is the test of whether we have juice or not as a political movement. And we got to sign up member by member, working all 435 members of the House, each individually. And we're helping others working with others and running weekly whip calls where we go through name by name, district by district, constituency by constituency, figuring out where is Congressperson so-and-so, where do they stand, what do they need to know, do we have anybody in their district who is involved in crypto that we can bring in front of them. And the playbook's not that hard. We can turn them, but it takes a lot of effort. And we're lucky we have a lot of partners in the industry who are working really effectively with us to turn votes. And we're doing that, day by day. But we're just going to get buffeted by external stuff that we can't control. The Hamas thing's been an issue. The speaker thing's been an issue. And there'll be 25 other issues. We'll have multiple near-death experiences, but we just got to keep going.
That's a great point. And I think even myself, I'm guilty of that, where, I'm kind of writing off 2024 because of the election cycle is always so crazy. But to your point, we are at a cusp of getting some bills through they're getting marked up. So we got to keep the momentum going. So that's a great point. And I certainly appreciate all the things Coinbase has been doing. I think you guys have certainly been the leaders here in the United States in pushing for regulations, stand with crypto movement, pushing back on things that may not fit well with crypto, like the IRS rules and so forth. So is there anything else you want to highlight on that front that Coinbase is doing in addition to advocacy and maybe any recent updates?
So one of the things I realized, and Brian actually said in our very first meeting, was we've got users in the United States. Like, how do we get them activated? And I kind of said to him, well, you got to be careful about how you activate people. And I said all these things that I thought were smart at the time. But I think over time, I've realized we have to activate these people. We have to get them going. Politics is, people perceive crypto. They don't understand the power of the scale of adoption that's out there in the community. And we did a survey on this. 52 million Americans have bought crypto. 52 million Americans, more Americans that own an electric vehicle, more Americans that hold a union card. And so what we did is we created this thing called standwithcrypto.org. And I would encourage everybody to go on the website. It's still developing. It's an independent organization. We've obviously given it a lot of seed funding, and we're doing a lot of tech work for it. But it's an independent campaign organization that's intended to organize the community. And they're already up in the air with some ads and media that they're doing. And I think they've done like 7 IRL events around the country. On November 1st, I'll be in Atlanta with the Stand With Crypto team, and they're doing an event there, which we're quite excited about, with the local blockchain clubs in Atlanta. And we're just out there in the community. And we have about 110,000 people, 110,000 people who have signed up to be advocates. And we're just barely at in the first inning of what we're building here. So what I would say to everybody on here is have conviction that you can make a difference. Sign on to standwithcrypto.org. There's really cool interfaces that are on there for calling or emailing your member of Congress. Some of these are AI powered, so it'll help write a letter for you. Otherwise, I'll give you a script so you can call your member. These sort of things make a huge, huge difference. So next time anybody who's listening to us sits around, wants to complain about policymakers, take at least 2 minutes of that complaining period that you're about to spend, go on standwithcrypto.org on your phone, click the Call My Congressman button. It'll immediately dial you through to your member of Congress. There's a script you can use, complain to them, and you'll have used that 2 minutes unbelievably effectively and made a real difference. Plus, you'll have your name signed up and you'll be part of the crypto army, which will be amazing.
Yeah, the first scenario where I saw this and the crypto community coming together was the infrastructure bill situation, where we were able to like pause and hold up the whole pushing through of certain things. And I was recently interviewing macro investor Raoul Pal, and we're talking about this from a human psychological level, and that Metcalfe's law. And people can be on Facebook and social platforms, but they're not as incentivized as they would be part of a financial network, let's say as Bitcoin holders or Ethereum holders or whatever it may be. And that governments actually, they don't know what's coming, and that people are so incentivized because they're part of that financial network and they can get the benefits from it, that the governments, if they don't get this right, will be almost in trouble with the backlash they're potentially going to face. What are your thoughts on that? I know it's very like philosophical and human psychology point of view and things like that.
Oh, it's one of the coolest things about my job. As you know, I've had being at Goldman and being government and this, that, and the other. One of the amazing things about crypto is I never, and I travel all around the world as a part of my job. And I was in Brazil and Canada last week, and I talked to policymakers everywhere. Maybe it's happened, but it's rare for me to walk into a room with a policymaker, even one who's negative on crypto, without them having some personal angle into crypto, including often their own staffers, because there's a big generational dimension to crypto. So there's often, and I made a point of kind of looking around the room, and you'll spot the crypto person among the staff, and the member, the policymaker, the regulator, maybe herself or himself negative. But there's somebody in that room who's an ally, who understands. And if the person's not in that room, it's often a family member who kind of gets it. And it becomes disarming. And we just need to get in there and have the dialogue. Every conversation with a policymaker moves the needle significantly because they see it all around them. They understand that it's happening. And most policymakers, the overwhelming majority of them, are good people trying to do the right thing, have too many things on their plate, don't know enough about it. And if you take the time to talk to your member of Congress, your senator, your legislator, and just say, let me tell you a little bit about crypto and why I got into it, it'll make the job of all of us who do this for a living infinitely easier. So it's a cool superpower everybody has, but I think most people don't know they have it.
For sure. So I want to talk a bit about the lawsuits that are happening in the industry. Obviously, they're very much specifically with the SEC. Coinbase is currently involved with a lawsuit with the SEC. Ripple, that case, there's been a lot of major takeaways. Some would see as a victory for the entire market. Recently with the Grayscale appeal as well, winning that. I don't know how much you can share here because it's ongoing litigation. What can you tell us about the lawsuit with the SEC? And are you using case law from the Ripple case as well as Grayscale case?
I would say a couple of things. One is we have by far the best lawyers anywhere. The Coinbase lawyers are extraordinary. Paul Grewal, Catherine Manerick, who's our head of litigation. I mean, they are beyond amazing. And we've hired the best outside counsel. And we actually have lawyers who want to work for us because lawyers who could work for anybody, outside counsel who want to work for us because they just know we're on the right side of the case. So that's something to feel really good about. But on the merits, if you think about it, the SEC is fundamentally making a basic argument. What they're saying is that every crypto token, maybe with the exception of Bitcoin, is a security. And the reason that it's a security is that people buy it with an expectation of making profit. And now you've had 3 different court rulings. So the XRP decision, the Terraform case, and I think the Uniswap case I think it was Uniswap. Anyway, there were three different court decisions with the judges, three different judges, formidable judges, federal judges saying you can't just say that a token is by itself is a security. You have to look at the facts and circumstances of the sale.
Right.
If there's certain representations being made and undertakings by the seller to the buyer, where they're committing as a condition of sale or as a part of the sale, essentially that they enter into a contract to do certain undertakings that go along with the token, you could potentially have a security. And if you don't have that that fact pattern, you don't have a security. And that is now consistently held in three different cases. And when you think about that, it leads you to a couple of things in our case. One is there is no privity between the developer. There is no sort of connection point between the developer of the token and the buyer of the token. We're an exchange. We're a order matching engine. We help anonymous buyers match with anonymous sellers. And so given how three different courts have ruled, it seems hard for the judge in our case to find that the facts and circumstances of the sale are such that the token travels with certain promises and undertakings, essentially a contract from the issuer of the token to the buyer. Because the buyer and the seller don't even know who they are, who each of them are. It's a secondary market. So, you never know how these courts' decisions land. But that, I think, is important as you think about our case. And then the other important part of our case is that if the SEC's theory worked, any sale of anything for profit would then fall under the SEC's jurisdictions as a security. So I buy a piece of property because I expect to make money off of it. Is that now a security? I buy a comic book. I buy a trading card. I buy a baseball cap. I buy an Air Jordan. I buy a coin, a classic watch, a classic car, an antique watch. It just strains credulity to think that the SEC's theory could hold. So we feel pretty good about our case. Obviously, the judge will have to decide. She just announced that she's going to have scheduled oral arguments in January. So we're looking forward to how that resolves. The last point I would make is that Brian's a really fascinating guy, or Brian Armstrong, in the sense that he obviously wants the case to land in a certain way, but maybe almost more than that, he wants clarity fast. And his view is, let's get it going. If the answer is to our liking, let's find out as quickly as we can and go to court if we need to. And if the answer is going to be not to our liking, let's find that out as fast as we can and just get going and re-architect to whatever the new requirements are. So we're pushing aggressively. I feel good about where we're going to land, but we'll obviously have to see what the judge decides.
Yeah, absolutely. And my hope is that Congress acts sooner than later and can put a lot of these things to bed, and we can have clarity, and entrepreneurs and innovators don't have to worry and look over their shoulder and can do their jobs, right, and build great companies and create jobs. And look, the entire United States can benefit from that from a GDP standpoint, because this is certainly the future. Now, I know we talked a lot about all the initiatives you guys are doing. Is there, as far as your roadmap, in 2024, anything that you can highlight that's on the horizon?
You mean policy roadmap or business roadmap?
Both, if possible, if we have time for it, but maybe more in the policy.
Well, on the policy roadmap, Fit 21 is the number one issue. Hopefully it's going to still be up for a vote in the early part of next year, although you never know with the sort of upheaval with the speaker vote. But I view that as issue number one. And people will say, as we talked about a moment ago, this is going to be hard, and it's election year, and this, that, and the other. Every vote that goes against us on Fit 21 will be hard to reverse. And every vote that is with us on Fit 21 is going to be sticky and will likely stay with us into 24, 25, 26, and whatever. So for people who guess that, well, look, it might not be this year, it'll be next year. We will almost certainly have a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives on Fit 21, whether we like it or not. And we need to turn every vote our way, because wherever those votes land this year is going to be hard to switch them down the road. And so I'm very seized with, and plus I find for my own team, and I think for as the community generally, we all like to talk a lot on Twitter or whatever it is. But in the end of the day, the best performance indicator, the best KPI for how we're doing as a policy effort is turning votes. So politicians will say friendly things, but they don't like to get pinned down. But we're going to have a real vote where they're going to have to put their voting card in and push the yes button or the no button. And so that's a real good measure of whether we're doing a good job. And I want to hit those metrics hard and have them go our way. So that's number one. Two is to work with Stand with Crypto and create a crypto voter going into the 2024 cycle. So we've invested heavily into Stand with Crypto. We're partnering with them where we can in different areas, particularly in doing these events on the ground around the country. We're supporting a number of outside groups who have an active political profile. And then we're coordinating with industry partners around the country, all with the goal of demonstrating that there's a crypto voter, that these 52 million Americans, many hundreds of thousands of whom, maybe millions, are extraordinarily passionate about crypto, that crypto is part of a factor in how they vote. And given how tight elections are, even a few thousand people matter, tens of thousands matters unbelievably, and any number beyond that, you're like in the major leagues. And I think there's no reason for us not to be in the major leagues, at least in a bunch of congressional districts, if not in a bunch of states like Montana, Ohio, Georgia, maybe Nevada, states where the marginal turnout and the turnout results can be a few thousand votes. I think we can produce some of those those kinds of numbers by the end of 2024. I don't see why we couldn't. And so that is a huge, huge part. And just to make sure people understand that that's the mission, that's where we're headed. And I think that's going to have a big, big impact. And then I think globally, we've got a number of global standard setting bodies that are establishing the architecture of financial regulation. So you might have seen that we just submitted our comment letter to the IOSCO, which is the Global Organization of Market Regulators on DeFi. Those things seem wonky and kind of not as exciting as the political stuff I just talked about, but they're really, really important. We have to speak to regulators in their own language, and that means bodies that most people have never heard of, like the Basel Committee, the G20, the Financial Stability Board, the IOSCO, the CPMI, and so on. We need to talk to them in terms they understand, with analysis they understand, and we're doing that at Coinbase, thanks to Brian's huge support of us. And we're moving the needle there as well. And then we need to get Coinbase, the go deep markets internationally that we're building in Canada, EU, UK, Australia, Brazil, Singapore, all of whom are in some stage of rulemaking, be a part of that rulemaking process. So that's why I was in Canada and Brazil last week to talk to the policymakers there. They're eager to hear from us, and we need to do our part to help them shape their thinking. And so there's a lot of other things on our plate, but I would say those are probably the top, among the top four.
That's great. And I love that you're meeting with, the regulators and politicians in other countries. And I know with Canada, I've had some of my podcast listeners in Canada complain a bit about their regulations and so forth, or lack thereof. So great to hear that you guys are engaging with them. Now, I want to jump quick to what's happening in the broader market, in the crypto market, with the little bit of time we have left. Everyone is waiting in anticipation for a Bitcoin Spot ETF approval. There's so many rumors and breadcrumbs and this and that about BlackRock. What are your thoughts? It seems everybody's clamoring for this, and registered investment advisors, everybody's antennas are up. What are your thoughts on everything that's been going on?
Look, I'll answer as a policy guy. If you read the court's decision, the court said that the SEC's ruling in the Grayscale case was arbitrary and capricious and unlawful. Short of corruption, there's nothing worse than a court can find with regard to the behavior of an agency. And I used to head an agency, so I have some, spider senses about what's good and what's bad. And this is the outer end of bad. And what the judge did, the three judges did, is they definitively did a full kind of review of every element of the SEC's analysis with regard to turning down the Grayscale application, and repudiated every bit of it. So this should not, we're all sitting on the edges of our seats, but this should actually be kind of a slam dunk. The court has essentially given us a roadmap for what the decision should be. This agency is behaving in ways that I'm not accustomed to, the SEC. And I don't have any insight more so than anybody else does about the timing, but I'm hopeful they'll issue a decision soon. They'll honor the findings of the court and kind of land where they need to and approve these multitude of applications. That would be the right answer, but you never know in today's Washington.
Faryar, I'm going to ask you a very complex question. Given your background, you mentioned running an agency. So Chair Gensler has been someone who, in his past life, promoted crypto, talked about the benefits of it, taught it at MIT. Yet when he found himself as the chair of the SEC, seems to have done a 180. And I don't know what you can share here, but it's just my own thoughts and things that people have discussions about. Is this a TradFi incumbents pulling the strings a bit here? Pressure that could turn someone who was pro-crypto almost seem like they're anti-crypto. What are your thoughts on what can you share there?
I'm pretty confident it's not that. I mean, I used to run government affairs at Goldman, so if there was a conspiracy, I would have been in the engine room, and I didn't see it. So, although you know how it is with people in conspiracies, they'll never admit to it. So maybe you should sort of be skeptical of my denial. But no, I don't think it's that at all. I think it's pretty simple. I think this administration has largely deferred to Elizabeth Warren on the appointments to the financial regulatory agencies and on the agenda of the financial regulators. They've done that for their own kind of political calculus. And so the financial regulators largely operate in a manner that is either driven by or highly informed by where she's coming from. And she has decided she doesn't like crypto. And so it's hard to be a financial regulator without towing that line. And so, I actually admire her. I mean, I like her ability to control this town. I mean, the joke in Washington is that Biden, won the election and Warren won the presidency because of the pervasive influence she has on financial regulation. Obviously, the president has full, control over everything else, but on the issues that they've ceded to her presence is outsized, and I think it manifests itself, very strongly at the SEC, at the FTC, at the CFPB, at the FDIC, somewhat at the OCC, probably less at the Fed. But that's nothing to it's nothing to complain about. It's just a reality, and so it just sort of redoubles the need for companies like us who have the ability to do so to meet that challenge. And that means to go to court when we need to go to court, to go to Congress when we need to go to Congress, and then engage directly with the regulators to make our arguments, and then to engage the broader public in kind of making sure that they're part of the debate on an issue like this. So I think this sort of thing happens, and we just need to respond. We in Coinbase are trying to do our part to respond, and I think in the end, the reason will prevail. The U.S. won't allow itself to fall behind in the way we indefinitely, and we just need to kind of stay focused and see it through.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly appreciate all the great work you and the folks at Coinbase are doing on behalf of the industry and pushing things forward. I got some wrap-up questions here for you before I let you go. If you could
Yeah.
create your own metaverse, what would the theme be? Where would Faryar go to?
Well, I wouldn't want to be in the metaverse. I'd want to be on my bike on somewhere. So I guess maybe a mountain bike metaverse, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as special as being outside, which I love.
Well, man, from what I'm seeing with what Mark Zuckerberg and Meta is doing, and Apple, they're going to release their version. What if you could go biking in some other country and it's so immersed? Maybe not spend all your time there, but
No, where I'd actually want to go is I want to go to the moon or to another planet.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I think between what Elon is doing and the technology that Zuckerberg is creating, I actually think it's an unbelievable gift to all of us. So whether it's people like us who are lucky enough to have good health, being able to maybe see Mars in an immersive way, in a way that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago, and maybe see it soon, I think that would be beyond exciting. And even see the moon, I think would be unbelievable. So, and I'd like to see under in the oceans, the depth of the oceans. Although there's nothing, it's so dark down there. I guess there's nothing really to see. But I would love to. I would love to see that. So yeah, that would be where I'd go.
Yeah, I'm in the same way. Space and definitely deep ocean, and, all these things. All right, rapid fire questions. Favorite food?
My mom's food. My mom's Iranian food cooking. That by far, anything she makes is amazing, amazing. So my mom's Iranian food.
Nice. Can't go wrong with that. Favorite musician or band?
The Avett Brothers. They're from, I think they're from South Carolina. They're an Americana band. They're amazing. I feel happy when I listen to them, even though a lot of their music is kind of moody and they have some ballads in there. But the Avett Brothers, Avett, are extraordinarily extraordinary. I've seen them in concert maybe 10, 12 times. And I just think they're amazing. And awesome. By the way, I had a chance to meet one of the members of the Avett Brothers when they were played in a local venue here in DC. A friend of mine got to know one of them, and I actually got emotional when I met him. It was so funny. It was, which I didn't think would happen, but I enjoy their music so much that it speaks to me in a way that when you actually hear the people who make the music, it's special.
Oh, that's awesome. Favorite movie?
Well, I love any Judd Apatow movie, and 40-Year-Old Virgin's probably my most favorite film of all time. It's sweet, juvenile, and hilarious, which maybe kind of is sort of my sweet spot of humor. But Judd Apatow, he made a movie called 17 Again with Zac Efron, which I just thought was exactly the same thing. Very sweet, very poignant, but hilarious and ridiculous at the same time. He's made maybe 10, 12 movies. He often casts his wife, I forget her name, as the female lead, and she's amazing. But people like Seth Rogen, Steve Carell, a lot of my favorite actors have been in his movies, and they're really outstanding. He's an outstanding producer director.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I love those movies as well. Favorite book?
I would say Endurance, which is the story of Ernest Shackleton's expedition into the Antarctica. This is, I think it would have been in the 1890s or early 1900s. It's an extraordinary tale of leadership and adventure. My other favorite book is Hamilton, Ron Chernow's Hamilton. I think it was one of the most riveting, amazing books of an immigrant who came to this country, really kind of humble beginnings, managed to get himself into New York intelligentsia of society, and then just through sheer force of talent, became one of the most consequential statesmen in American history. I mean, much of the architecture of our financial system, our economy, our system of government is built by him. Mm. And reading that book is just so amazing. It's really a fantastic book.
Oh, that's awesome. Faryar, a pleasure chatting with you. And I got to have you back on, because you guys are doing great things on the policy front, regulations, and much more. Thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you for having me on, Tony. I appreciate it. It was a great fun.